agricultural land. So it's not like we have crap land, well, might as well put it in trees, doesn't have any other value. It is intense farming land. One little quick one of the reasons I always say we're screwed. I'd be at Guelph at Royal Park, so it's a lot of silver maples, so I'd be out collecting seeds. And I think I had long hair at the time, I kind of switch. I have short hair for too long, and then people think I'm conservative or something, so then I have to grow it long just to prove that I don't think that way. Anyway, so I'm sitting there collecting these seeds, and people would ask me, what are you doing? And so this one lady came on, she's pushing a baby stroller, and she goes, I have to ask you, what are you doing? And I think she thought I was looking for crack in the grass or something. And I said, I'm collecting these tree seeds, these silver maple seeds. She goes, are you going to eat them? And I said, no, maybe you can, but eat a lot of other seeds. But I said, no, I'm going to grow trees from them. And she goes, is that what you grow trees from? And then I realized, oh yes, we are screwed. Because the whole disconnect of where our food comes from, how to grow a tree, how to grow a plant, we really don't know a lot of that, and the kids don't know that. And that's one of the things about education. If we don't know about these things, those choices of, do I get this industrialized meat, or do I get something that's grown naturally? Is there a benefit to it? So one of the things I was at the Central Ontario on Friday agricultural conference, and if anybody's seen the book, The Dorito Effect. So he talks about, why we're all obese and out of shape and everything like that, is the fact that we replaced nutrient-dense real food with flavor packets, basically. And Doritos was the first one to do it. I'm going to make corn chips taste like a taco. So they made flavor. Now when you have fresh squeezed orange juice, people don't realize there's a 1 million liter tank sitting there with orange juice, fresh squeezed, but it's sitting there for a year. And it doesn't even taste like orange juice. And then like Tropicana, Minute Maid, they all have a different flavor packet. It's actually perfume companies that mastered it, and you go to this perfume company and you go, okay, I need some more Tropicana flavor. And they just drop the flavor in with the freshly squeezed orange juice a year ago, and it becomes that exact same flavor. It's better to get concentrated. At least there's some nutritional profile to it. It's nothing but that flavoring. So it really shows us what we've come to, and all these, whether it's MSG, all these food additives that are in there, but there's no minerals, no nutrients. So he really got into this whole thing, so we had a panel discussion on that. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But when I talked about farming and, what is farming and, this whole ecosystem approach, and I've shied away from the word permaculture. A bunch of permaculture people don't like, because it's got into this kind of non-scientific, not that I don't disagree that some of the things, but it hasn't really been studied into, from the herb spiral to the, bread oven and all this kind of stuff, which is fine, but, I think if we want adoption, we actually have to put the scientific merit to these things as well, and not just sometimes the hoity-toity stuff. Not that the hoity-toity is wrong, it's just that when there's no money, to do a study on these things, and you'll never see many studies on whole foods and the benefits. It's the drug companies, the amount of cost to do these kind of things. So why farming has to change? FAO is the Food and Agriculture Organization for the UN. So I try to use the big studies, things that aren't too biased. They came out that, maybe we don't have to worry about climate change. We only have 60 years of soil left before all the soils of the world collapse. And, up here is not as bad because the glaciers push down snow a whole bunch of different times. We have 40 feet of soil. We have the Great Lakes. We could probably recover it quite a bit. In between the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn, they don't have that kind of luxury. You kill the trees, it turns into desert. I think these 2 points, you can just look at banking. We need 6 million more farmland every year to feed the growing population. But we lose 12 million hectares a year. So just do the math, it's pretty simple. We're kind of running at a loss. And I think this is where we start having to address too, is our population. People say, well, you sound like a Hitler. Whether China had the one-child policy, but I think fundamentally a human being takes a certain square footage to survive. If you're a vegan living on a few weeds, you probably don't need as much land. You probably have 15, 20 billion. If you're eating a rich Canadian diet the way we are, maybe 750 million, because at the 7 billion right now, we're using if everybody lived like Canadians, we need 8 planet Earths to sustain humans. The way we're living right now, we need 2.5 planet Earths. So we're clearly not living sustainable. And the thing is people say, well, you know, how can you say that? How are you going to do it? I said, I don't know how we're going to do it. I don't have the answers to culling our population. But I said, my response is, if we don't do it, Mother Nature will. You can either have the suffering of Mother Nature through disease, food shortages, however it's going to happen, or maybe we can decide, you know, maybe you could have $100,000 for people that will permanently sterilize themselves or something like that. You know, it seems like we use capitalism and money to drive everything else. Maybe we can, I don't know, just a thought, but you know, we can't jettison people to Mars yet. So, you know, there's only so many of us that can be here. And, you know, there's all the studies about education, educating women, people, and then they have less people and stuff like that, less kids. But we have too many for how we're living right now. And even with technology, I don't think we can overcome that. One of the things with this, the 60, they actually assessed another organization, it wasn't the FAO, but they assessed Britain, and they say they have 100 crop rotations left. So even areas that aren't tropical are in trouble as well. So, you know, what is it about soil or about farming? And, you know, when I said about the whole idea of the whole idea that, you know, the fossil fuels are the big problem in that. And a lot of these guys, well, we started this trend, you can look, it's before we started really using fossil fuels. It was the invention of the plow, you know, a couple thousand years ago that we started plowing. And if you don't really believe me there, I'll show you a picture that really kind of brings it up. But 50 to 70% of the world's cultivated soils have lost the carbon. In soil organic matter, in 1% soil organic matter, or in soil organic matter, 58% of soil organic matter is carbon. Okay? And if you have 1% soil organic matter on your farm, you have 21,000 pounds of carbon in that acre stored in the soil. So if you have 6, you can multiply it by 6%. 3 centimeters of topsoil, you know, they say 3 to 5 centimeters. Takes about 1,000 years to produce naturally if you just let it go. So then and with NASA, here's a little bit about climate change, really quick, which was depressing on the next slide. But NASA has the best equipment for planet warming and that kind of stuff. 2015 is the hottest year ever. But this is the one that kind of got me, that just came out, and you can do it by location. So where I live, Wellington, Huron, Bruce, there's another county there, Gray, I think it was. They surveyed and asked people if they believed climate change was human caused. Only 40% of the population believed that. The other 60%, 70% thought climate change is real, but it's not necessarily humans. So 60%, you know, are on that of the people that believed that climate change was really happening, that, you know, didn't believe that it was human caused. So I thought it was kind of a done deal that we accepted that. And to give you an idea, like, most people believe that smoking causes cancer. Now, there's never been a causation study to show that, because you'd have to lock people up in a room on the exact same variables except for smoking to really see if it did. But, you know, through epidemic studies, you know, looking at lungs and showing, you know, people that are smoking populations, they have much higher. So what they do is statistics, and they have a standard deviation. And when you have a standard deviation of 95%, you're pretty much assured that that is what it happens. So smoking has a 95% correlation to smoking. Now, if you look at climate change, the same thing. 95% standard deviation that we cause climate change. But not only do they have that, but they have 10 times the information saying that that is true than we do that has smoking causes cancer. So if you stretch your imagination that smoking causes cancer, hopefully you can stretch your imagination that we're causing this climate change. So this is the point what I wanted to make. This area right here was called the Fertile Crescent 10,000 years ago. Richest soils on the planet. Now, from the west side of Africa all the way to the Gobi Desert is a continuous desert. The Sahara expands at 40 kilometers a year. And I know Ray Zahab, well, I don't know him. I've talked to him a few times on the phone and stuff. So he ran from here to here, 7,500 kilometers in 118 days, like it was like 85 kilometers a day or something like that, running through the desert. And he said, you get in the middle of the Sahara, it's kind of funny, Rod, because you see all these paintings on rocks and stuff with giraffes and zebras and everything, right in the middle of the Sahara. So obviously at one time those animals were running around there, but they're not anymore. So, you know, all the deserts of the world, I've seen studies, we've created them all. There's one here and one up here in Canada that are in rain shadows that are natural, one in Patagonia and one up there, that are natural deserts. But all these are really just man-made in tropical areas, you know, when we start cultivating. So, and then when I started doing all the tree stuff, and then when I realized, I started doing all the research and started pointing that farming was one of our big problems. So just to give you an idea, and I don't want to make this, well, it is negative, but it's like the end of the world because I want to show options, you know, or opportunities that what we can do. So if you look at animal, this is FAO, animal agriculture is 18% of our greenhouse gases. To give you an idea of all the transportation on the planet, planes, trains, automobiles, everything is only 13 to 15% of the greenhouse gases. So significantly. Now, some studies have shown this to be 51% if you put all the inputs into animal agriculture. The Chatham House report, actually, one of the things that, if anybody knows Avatar or anything James Cameron, so he did the grass, beef, all that kind of stuff, believed that you needed the beef, and then watched Forks Over Knives and went vegan overnight because he's a really staunch environmentalist. And you know, he's done those documentaries on it as well. So he gave the Avatar, if you look at the Chatham House report, the Avatar group gave, I think he gave hundreds of millions of dollars to it. He says, look at all the information, all the FAOs, everybody's information, and I want to know exactly what farming is doing. So they did this big report, and 29% of the global emissions. And the Chatham House is one of the most respected research kind of organizations for putting the information together. So they're showing 29% of greenhouse gases are from farming. So that it's the single biggest input on the planet. Next, yep.
May I just make one comment? That's how agriculture is practiced today.
Right. Industrial, that is...
You have to make that comment.
Oh, yes, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Industrialized farming, feeding animals corn and soy and grains is the biggest, is where you, if you look at it. If they break it up, you can see there's some that it's not as accurate, but industrialized farming, that's the big thing. And that's where I'm going to get to.
It's also the reason that we're losing so much phosphate at the moment.
Yeah, the nitrous oxide.
That's even worse than our soil. That if we run out of phosphate, that's the end of it.
Yeah, and one of the things is and that's my point when I go on. It's the way we farm is the 99 kind of percent. And I know I'm preaching to the converted because not many probably people in this room run corn every year and just dump tons of fertilizer and pesticides on. So it's, and that's what I talked about, the hypocrisy and everything and being within it.
And of course the plow is the worst piece of equipment ever.
Right, because every time you plow, you really, your soil organic matter poofs away, and 58% of that is carbon. And one of the other things when you plow as well is all the nitrous oxide, which has 300 times the heat holding capacity of carbon, goes. And then when you feed ruminants corn, their methane increases by 95%. So their farts and burps become a huge emitter. So dairy cows, the average dairy cow produces as much or more greenhouse gases as the average car. So you can just, the math becomes pretty, but it's what we're feeding the animals and how we're, the whole process. And that's where I'm trying to lay the framework to try to get to, where I see the next generation. And what some of the environmentalists say, industrialized animal culture is the only way to feed the planet, because if you want to have space for nature, because grass-fed beef takes more space, because Corn gives you 13 million calories per acre. So this whole thing, but it's a wrong mentality, and hopefully I can show that as well. Oh, thanks. So I'm just going to take you step by step through this. 50 to 70%, which we talked about, of the soil's carbon has been released through agriculture. So there's 2,500 gigatons of carbon in the soil, stored in the soil. The air has 800 gigatons. There's 560 gigatons with all, like humans, plants, animals, all the biotic life on the planet. So you add those two together, it doesn't even add up to what is in the soil. They say 80% of the biomass of living things on the planet, some say as high as 90, 95%, is underground, is under your feet. It's not all the elephants and the big sequoias and things like that. It's under your feet. And how important that is, I'm going to talk about soils a little bit more as well. 58% of your soil organic matter is carbon, 21 tons, not pounds, 21 tons of carbon per acre and 1% organic matter. So that's how much is there. Now, if the whole planet, all the agricultural land on the planet, increased the soil organic matter by 1%, just 1%, we would bring our greenhouse gases pre-industrial revolution. And if we raised by 2.5%, you'd bring it under 300 parts per million. Now, scientists say we got to get it under that 350. You know, the magic was if we went over 450 or whatever it is, which we did a year and a half ago now, we're doomed. And we went over that. And that was what they were trying to produce the magic line. Let's not go over this. It's really bad. Now, the one thing is if you look at all the markers for whether we're going to a hot house or a cold house, whether we're going to another glacier or to that kind of thing, all our science shows we should be getting colder. With the solar flares, they have all these different things they look at it. Every single one of them shows we should be cooling. So all the scientists say we're going into an ice age. But to give you an idea, 10,000 years ago, the global temperature dropped between 1 and 2 degrees. And that put a kilometer of ice right here. Just because it all comes down to jet streams and ocean currents. That's what kind of controls the climate. And if you look at North America, you've got Florida here. Instead of those currents coming all the way up to Newfoundland, they went across just at the northern part of Florida and went over to Africa. So you didn't have those currents, and then the snow just came in. That was 1 to 2%, 1 to 2 degrees. So we've already raised over a degree. So, the oil companies are going to say, well, we saved you from an ice age or something like that. But what I'm saying is, through farming, we could control greenhouse gases or carbon in the atmosphere and everything else, and we could keep, and this would be, like this is me playing God, but you could keep a steady state in climate. We've been lucky the last couple thousand years that we've had this steady state in climate. If it goes really cold or really warm, it makes it really tough for farming and all the other things. But just think of it. By capturing carbon in the soil or releasing it, you could manipulate the carbon in the atmosphere to either, keep cooling or, so that's just a theory I have. I won't go any further with it.